and I probably shouldn't say this on the tape, and you all can get rid of it, but he's a homosexual.
Gray.
Gray.
Okay.
He's what they call a cherry Marine.
She then describes the initiation ceremonies in more detail and noticed that her husband is one of the sources of this information.
I mean, if this really got out, that these guys are all inducted because they've got some kind of homosexual thing on them.
Indoctrination. I mean, or induction. They have to do that.
Yeah.
They do that.
Yeah. Even
in a coffin. And it's even now coming into the military totally. The chiefs do that. They put them in the coffin. They do the bowling ball trick.
Okay, you're going to explain this. What happens when you get in the coffin? Why do you get in a coffin?
Oh, they get, when you get your eagles, that's a German thing.
Okay.
You know, it's what the German high command did, and most of them, you know, had the boyfriends and stuff, the Krupps and all of that. It is a German thing that they say goes back to Greece, and it's all the male Marine-looking men that they do it with. See? So now the chiefs have to do that. What they do is they get, George said it's like a zoo. They get everybody really drunk, and they sometimes call it dining in. Shellback is another time that they do it. Not everybody does it, but the ones who do it, if they're young, they get right up to the top. It's a...
okay, well, what actually do they do? They've got a coffin, they get inside this...
Anal sex. Oh, that. They do... They put them in the coffin, and they do things.
Okay, they perform things on each other?
Yeah, while they're all around there going drunk.
I see. So there's a guy in the coffin.
Yeah, and he's the one who
is the recipient of all the acts.
Right, right.
Yeah. Probably safe to conclude these are oral sex acts on this guy or something like that. Okay.
Yeah, oral and anal, whatever.
Yeah.
But
what's the significance of the coffin?
I don't know.
Although she never explained what the bowling ball trick is, you should ask yourself, would a top military official, or any other man, tell his wife that he was pressured into joining these bizarre ceremonies if they were not true?
I mean, even Eisenhower played these games. Even Mike Kemp out in, it's called the Hermitage.
The Hermitage.
In California, where they all they get drunk and they run around nude in the woods and stuff.
Bohemian Grove kind of
That's
thing.
it, Bohemian Grove.
Okay. And rather than Hermitage, it's the Bohemian Grove?
Bohemian Grove, that's the name of it.
During interviews with Tim Russer, we find that both John Kerry and George W. Bush freely admit they belong to Skull and Bones, but neither seem very eager to discuss it.
You were both in Skull and Bones, the secret society.
It's so secret we can't talk about it.
What does that mean for America? The conspiracy theorists are going to go wild.
I'm sure they are. I don't know. I haven't seen the web.
Number 322?
First of all, he's not the nominee. And, look, I look forward...
Are you prepared to lose?
No, I'm not going to lose.
You both were members of Skull and Bones, a secret society at Yale. What does that tell us? Not much, because it's a secret. Is there a secret handshake? Is there a secret code? I wish there were something secret I could manifest. 322, a secret number? There are all kinds of secrets, Tim, but one thing is not a secret. I disagree with this president's direction.
The Bohemian Grove is not a New Age fad. The first American president we know of that was a member was William H. Taft. It's also important to know that Taft also belonged to Skull and Bones. We'll now present an overview of very well-documented facts about the Grove.
Since we blew their cover in 2000, the Grove's gone public to a certain extent. They released this photo of a 1915 ritual. Here you have the hooded figure over the mock sacrifice. And here's a simulated hanging from 1908. In this picture, you see a photo from 1909 with what looks like public officials in attendance. A black boy is tied down to some type of table, and around him we see people in strange garb. I'll leave it to you to figure out what they're doing. In 2004, the Grove released this photo from 1934 of members in hoods. The Canaanite deity MOLECH was worshipped in Greece, Babylon, and then later in Europe. It is normally symbolized by a bull or an owl or some type of horned beast, and children are sacrificed to it. It is the precursor of all modern death cults. I was able to get out of the cult compound with this program cover from the Cremation of Care. And right on the front, where a child would be burned, they had photoshopped in the image of a skeleton burning in the flames. What purpose does this all serve, having world leaders congregate and engage in an ancient Canaanite ritual of mock child sacrifice? It's a way of binding them together, whether it's George Herbert Walker Bush or Henry Kissinger or Ronald Reagan or Federal Reserve Chairman Alan Greenspan, who's been a member since 1984. It's about bringing them together. Nowhere is the origin of the cult more in evidence than in former German Chancellor Helmut Schmidt's own autobiography, Men and Powers, a political retrospective. He talks about how they have their own German groves where they do these rituals, these, quote, druidic rituals. But he says his favorite place to do the rituals is at Bohemian Grove. This is a book that you can get at the library written by him. He talks about the Trilateral Commission, the CFR, the Bilderberg Group, and world government. And he says that much of the decisions are made at the Bohemian Grove. We were able to obtain the internal annals of the Bohemian Grove from 1987 to 1996, a publication only given to members. And in it, we see pictures of George W. Bush and his father, Newt Gingrich. We see all of these different famous individuals there at the Grove. Walter Cronkite, Jimmy Carter, Jack Kemp, Richard Milhouse Nixon. The list goes on and on. If you're still doubting reality, here is a November 1989 issue of Spy magazine. The Grove released photos of themselves dancing around dressed like women. And in the article, they admit that they do mock human sacrifices. The article went on to show artist renditions of the Molech idol, as well as discussing how they bus in male prostitutes and how AIDS was a big problem. Then a New York Post article in July of 2004 reported how a top gay porn star serviced the moguls at the Bohemian Grove.
The Bohemian Club is not limited to the United States. There are and were many Bohemian members in Europe, including Adolf Hitler. Let's hear what renowned journalist John Buchanan has to say about the Nazi connection and the Bohemian Grove.
I've been an investigative reporter and a journalist for 35 years. I've worked in every major media market in the United States, and I've written for more than 100 newspapers and magazines nationally and internationally. So last September 17th, I became the first journalist in U.S. history to go to the U.S. National Archives and the Library of Congress and pore over the thousands of pages of documents in both places to prove beyond a shadow of a doubt or any refutation of the facts that Prescott Bush, the grandfather of George W. Bush, and George Herbert Walker, his maternal great-grandfather for whom his daddy is named, were Nazi traitors to the country who should have been tried for treason. 2 weeks ago, in early August, a major world newspaper, The Guardian of London, finally got on the story internationally, and they flew a renowned reporter of theirs named Duncan Campbell over to Washington to take me back to the archives and Library of Congress so that they could verify that these explosive documents were real and I didn't have forged copies. Prescott Bush was the grandfather of George W. Bush and the father of George Herbert Walker Bush, and George Herbert Walker Bush is named for his father-in-law, George Herbert Walker. Prescott Bush graduated from Yale in 1917 and was in Skull and Bones with E. Roland Harriman, who was the younger brother of W. Averill Harriman. The Bush family really had nothing going. They were essentially social climbers and opportunistic people. At the time that Prescott Bush met Dorothy Walker, he was a tire salesman. And George Herbert Walker, as all fathers do when their daughter's going to marry someone, said in his heart, you know, it's not an appropriate thing socially that my daughter marry a tire salesman. So he brought Prescott Bush first into Brown Brothers Harriman and then Union Banking Corporation. In actuality, it was anything but a bank. It was essentially a Nazi money laundering operation that had a lot of tentacles into a lot of different other businesses. They owned a shipping line called Hamburg American Line, for example, which was